So thank you. Welcome. So this is Shifting the Dial. So thanks for choosing us as your first workshop. Just to reiterate what's on the screens for you. So in this session, we're going to be exploring equality, diversity and inclusion, talking about good practice, what's out there, and maybe some of the challenges that we can still need to overcome. So just in terms of brief introductions, my name is Tom Gayle. I'm a freelance broadcast journalist, and thank you very much to Leon and for the D word for inviting me to host this workshop, but hopefully very little from me, plenty from our esteemed panel, and also there will be opportunity throughout the session to ask questions. So if anyone does have any specific, I'm more than happy to sort of guide that into the conversation, but we'll essentially just see how it rolls. So obviously working my way across through from my right to your left. So we do have Jon Holmes, the digital media editor and journalist. He's the founder of Sports Media LGBT+. T+, sorry. Get my T's and my 2's mixed up there. Thanks for joining us, Jon.
No, thank you very much for having me. As you might have spotted, that isn't actually me. And I don't work for the Sunday Times. But it's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hayley Bennett, award-winning diversity, equality, inclusion consultant. Is that you?
I'm here. So you're stuck with me because I think we had a last-minute pull-out, but I'm really happy to be chatting to you all.
Very good
Company.
Thank you very much for joining us. Pranav Soneji, you're the co-founder and director of Livewire Sport. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'd happily take Jon Holmes' photo.
And Drew Christie, I think man who perhaps doesn't need very much introduction, but chair of BComs. Drew, thanks very much for bringing your time.
Cool.
I was thinking of lots of different ways of sort of how do we kick this off and approach equality, diversity, inclusion. I thought, all right, let's try and do a little task about how difficult it is to get us to agree on something. But I just thought a sort of part of the problem sometimes, we do see it's a bit too complicated. And I think the massive benefit of a session like this is the umbrella of sport is obviously a huge part of what we're going to be here. I don't know if this will unite us all, but I want to do, starting off with this, is based on someone who spent the past 4 or 5 days in a small little room doing the BBC Red Button as regards to various channels, but Wimbledon. So I want to get anyone's thoughts. So Hayley, if I can ask you, do you have any take on Wimbledon as regards to what we're on? Day 9, I think. Have you been watching it? Is there anything that stood out for you?
I think I'm going to take like a bit of a roundabout way of giving my take. I think the thing that I really like about Wimbledon is what a lot of people don't like about Wimbledon, which is this idea that people only watch that and they don't watch tennis for the rest of the year. There are some people in the country who do that. But I actually think that's not necessarily a bad thing, because whenever I'm going around someone's house or I'm chatting to like auntie or uncle, they've been watching it. So it's something that we can all sort of have a little bit of a chat about. And I think it's quite good from a media perspective that it's quite accessible. Like we're watching it, we can easily put on the TV and watch it, or it's on the news. So I think it's just, from my perspective, I'm not going to comment on the sport itself. It's not my favourite sport, tennis, but I actually really like it as
we won't hold that against you, don't worry. Drew, have you been back and forth on various channels and platforms with regards to consuming Wimbledon?
This year I've been slightly busy, work-wise, but I did see Serena sadly go out, which brought a lump to my throat, unfortunately. But I think Wimbledon is, you know, as well as being the chair of BComs, my kind of day job, I'm a sports producer, freelance sports producer, but for many years I worked at the BBC and I worked at Wimbledon for probably 5 years straight. And it was actually my favourite event to work at and to attend. It's actually a really, really lovely event. I don't know if people have been, but whether you're a tennis fan or not, I'd recommend people to check it out. And I think it was one of those things that, particularly being a black guy born and raised in South East London, although Wimbledon's in South West London, but it's very, very different. I didn't know if I'd feel comfortable there, but I did. And as an event, I really do enjoy it. But this year I've been a little bit busy, so I've not watched that much, or as much as I would like to.
And Pranav, am I right if my research is correct, or Wimbledon one of your many partners that you work with as regards to their media in and around events?
Yeah, so we've been working with Wimbledon since 2012. Initially, it was one person who was doing the live blog or the live updates on the website, to now, as part of Two Circles, which is the wider company that Livewire Sport is now part of, we've got 76 people on site. And that includes not only the whole content piece across social media channels, the media production, graphic design, motion design, but there's also the deeper marketing piece. So that's around insights, impact, ticketing, sponsorship measurement and things like that. So for us, it's not only about what happens on the court, but it's everything that goes beyond and strengthening that Wimbledon brand. And obviously working in social and digital, for us, Wimbledon, for me anyway, sets the marker for how a traditional, you look at the history, the heritage, how can it be still so relevant in a modern day world? And I think it's kudos to the brilliant foresight the team at Wimbledon have, but also to our wider teams who work on the project to be able to keep innovating and pushing the boundaries every single year. And I have watched about 30 minutes of tennis as well. Look at that. So yeah, a lot of it is just looking at multiple screens. One of them is usually not a TV. So yeah.
John, I'm 3 for 3 here. Everyone else has been able to give me at least a semi-answer as regards to Wimbledon. Don't disappoint me.
No, I won't. I'm on the Norrie train, loving it. It's been fantastic. Enjoyed all the kind of commendations for Sue Barker, absolute pioneer for sports media industry, I think, for women, as well as she sort of says her goodbyes to the tournament. I'm sort of always keen to sort of see a bit more kind of representation in different areas, particularly an event that's so traditionally conservative as Wimbledon. So the fact we've just had Pride weekend and there wasn't really any acknowledgement of that at Wimbledon, despite the fact the LTA as an organisation has just done some amazing work for Pride and diversity and inclusion in tennis more widely across the country. So when you've got somebody like Billie Jean King, sort of present at Wimbledon all fortnight, I think it would be nice to sort of show a little bit of a nod towards that as well.
And I think that's a perfect disclaimer. We're not saying EDI in sport, any industry is perfect, but hopefully for this panel, what we have out here is lots of lived experience of people who are out there working with very successful organisations as regards to their approach to how to effectively implement it. So, Hayley, just forgive me, but could you mind just explaining as regards to what you see as equality, diversity and inclusion within the workplace?
It's good that you're asking me this because I'm going to have an away day where I'm going to actually establish how I communicate this with my clients. But in my mind, I actually mainly focus on like the E for EDI, which I think should be standing for equity. I think in sport we still use equality a lot. There is a difference. I think for me, equity is an approach that you take to sort of recognise that there are different barriers that exist for marginalised communities, underrepresented communities, and you take steps to continually address and remove those barriers. So it's like a process. So with the work that I do, a lot of the time people will come to me and say, we want to do like EDI. They just want to hire in like diverse talent. For me, the approach I like to take is actually thinking, let's look at what the barriers are, let's remove them, let's do proactive things to readdress the balance and create equity. But actually, let's not just focus on like recruitment, for example, having role models, visibility campaigns. Let's look at some of like, the structural issues. And I think like from a media perspective and a sport perspective, I think we're quite good at like the diversity bit, like we're doing a lot to try and increase representation. But for me, I feel like the approach we kind of need to take is recognising that there are barriers that we need to remove so that actually, naturally, over time, we will get more people in. And whilst we're doing that, let's redress the balance by putting some of these programmes in place. So that can look like, making sure we're changing recruitment processes. Like we talked on the panel earlier, actually having recruitment processes for some of these roles, like it should be something that everyone does, but we know that doesn't always happen. Actually having proper processes in our organisation, proper management, because actually like management is probably one of the biggest barriers. If you've got a crap manager, you're going to leave. Or if you've got a good manager, you can attract people in as well. So it's more, I guess, the sort of behind the scenes side is more what I do. And then the visible side you do see through some of the programmes, initiatives, training, etc.
Drew, I think echoing what was said in the opening panel and what Hayley's touched on there, I think the key thing that came out was strategy. The sort of perhaps the premise is that we've sort of been staggering around in the dark, no pun intended, as regards to how do we solve this. I'm pretty sure, perhaps speaking on behalf of this whole panel, we've all been approached by people saying, who do you know from a diverse background? Can you get them a job? And sometimes I know, and I've been a beneficiary of that, and I've helped other people get that. But the key is, it needs to be at the core, isn't it? And I think obviously from yourself, from being with Beacons from the get-go, that's something you've been working incredibly hard to say to organisations, this is not a quick fix. We need to have a daily approach as regards to how we evolve 360.
100%. I mean, it's something that I've worked in sports, I've worked in the media for more than 20 years now. And a lot of times this debate seems to go around in circles. And for me, there isn't one answer, but definitely, if it's not a central point of your organisation and your structure and your thinking, then it's never going to change. And I think that short-termism that you've talked about in terms of, do you know a black person? Do you know a woman? That might solve a particular problem at that point, but you have a wider issue. And I think, a bit like what Hayley was talking about equity, I think inclusion is really important. How are organisations moving towards making their space a happier, more positive, warmer, more welcoming environment for everybody? And I think having worked, I worked at the BBC for 10, 11 years. I enjoyed my time. At the same time, speaking from a personal level, it wasn't the most inclusive place for me personally. And I know that other, particularly black staff, from my own personal perspective of diversity, I know it's not always been like that, and I know a lot of the problems are still continuing. I'm sure if you spoke to people in this building, they'd say the same thing. So I think the real key thing is, and what we try to do at BComs, through our partnerships with News UK, we're trying to help, through our partnerships with BT Sport, through our partnerships with ITV Sport, is we're trying to put ourselves as consultants, as sounding boards, as building bridges between staff and management. Because I think a lot of the time, somebody asked a question before about whether senior leadership has got the ability to actually lead in this area. And I think a lot of times senior leaders think they're doing a good job, but they're not. And can their staff actually tell them that you're failing in this area? Probably not, because they're scared about their careers, their progression and whatnot. So I think having a mechanism and having bridges where staff can talk honestly, away from maybe senior people who can potentially impact their careers, is very important. And I think particularly the relationship we have with ITV Sport, where we've gone into ITV Sport, we've consulted with their senior management, but we've also set up a separate EDI group with staff where we can talk, but we can also feedback. And it's kind of anonymous in that sense. So someone can tell us if there's an issue, and we can say, you know what, we've heard X, Y, Z, or something could be improved. And it's not an individual who's then having to go to somebody that may be doing their appraisal or maybe doing their, pay rise, etc. And I think that's really, really key to have those kind of mechanisms, that strategy in place with specialists in the field. Because I think too often EDI is something that's added on to people's work. So you've got somebody like, myself, I'm a producer, I'm busy, I'm full-time working. And do you want to lead on diversity as well? Well, probably not. I might want to do it because I want to help improve things. Do I have the time? Do I have the energy? Do I have the expertise? Probably not. And so I think organisations need to really, if they want to take it seriously, you need to really think of a strategy. You need to work with people that can develop that. You need to put resources towards it, time towards it, and be there for the long run.
And I think we've got some examples in the panel, which we will get to in due course. But Jon, I think this is an easy question, but sometimes people don't quite see it. What do you feel is the benefits of having a diverse workforce?
Well, the most important thing is that the representation of all our communities is kind of there in the office, in the workplace, and also through the content that is produced by that organisation. Certainly when it comes to sports media, we want to empower everybody to kind of see themselves reflected. Have kind of, that note about role models. I think it's good to have those figures in the industry that people can look up to and want to emulate, but also, to kind of show that diversity in terms of the, the content that we're creating and that businesses are producing. So I think that's really important. From the LGBT perspective that I've sort of largely been involved in, I think, my experience of working in a big sports media company was largely that I certainly felt like I was the only kind of LGBT person in that space for a long period of time. And so I thought about how can I sort of help to kind of make this environment more comfortable, more welcoming for people to come along after me. And I think a lot of that, certainly the area that I obviously specialise in, is through kind of educating people, hopefully about different experiences within sport. And that now, and I hope, having sort of left that company and sort of moved on, is that I hope people now look at what's being done there, and it is fantastic work. This is Sky Sports that I'm talking about, and that people look at that and think that there's an employer with a diverse workforce, but also one that reflects its values in the content that it produces, and that's a place that I'd like to work at, and I hope we've contributed to doing that.
Pranav, we said this is industry-wide, it's all workforces, but I know I've heard you speak previously about what an opportunity we have in sport, because not many industries can captivate the globe at times. If we're thinking about major events, World Cups, Olympics, Paralympic Games, obviously Women's Euros kicking off tomorrow, we mentioned about Wimbledon now, just that audience we know is diverse, isn't it? So that's such a huge starting point in terms of being able to do this properly.
Yeah, I mean, we often talk a lot about, we serve the most diverse audiences in the world on a number of different platforms. And we look at our own workforce and think, do they represent those people? And we're talking global here as well. So people where English may not be their first language, it's incredible that the internet has democratized the media. Because previously we talk in Two Circles, we talk a lot about rewiring sports, and specifically from an analog era to a digital era. The analog era was made for a specific type of person. And that was basically well-off, affluent, white males in the Western world. The internet has completely changed that. So how can we continue to drive the very best for our audiences? And from a business perspective, the more we do that, the more we actually achieve our business objectives as well for our clients. So for us, the diversity thing is just as much about the people working for us as much as their thought. And that's where I think we really benefit, and that's where sport drives that innovation. And specifically, we just need to look on TikTok, YouTube, the amount of talent, natural talent that's just started in their bedrooms, being able to take that to a completely new platform, all off their own back, with absolutely no support from the traditional media, and then the traditional media having to pivot and realise that, oh my God, these people are actually got a captivated audience, and the engagement and the relationship they have with their fans is second to none. And that's the sort of thing that broadcasters absolutely, thrive for. So for us, how can we continue to maintain those relationships, nurture that incredible talent, give them the same sort of pathways, and then take them to hopefully where I don't have to sit on panels like this anymore.
And just following on from that, do you mind just explaining about the Livewire Diversity in Sport mentoring program?
Yeah, sure. So I probably should mention, so I'm a co-founder of Livewire Sport. So I used to work with Drew at the BBC many, many years ago, and then in 2011 founded Livewire Sport. And we're a digital agency, a content agency, I should say, working with sports rights holders. And we work with Premier League, and I can see Hayley Bennett here, Wimbledon, Channel 4. We work with some incredible names. And then in February this year, we were acquired by a company called Two Circles, who are a big marketing agency focusing on data. So now we're very much data and content and bringing all of that together. And in 2019, we founded what was the Diversity and Digital Mentoring Program. And that was for us to, we realized that our staff didn't reflect the audiences that we serve. So what can we do and get our staff involved to be able to engage them? So we created a mentoring program which had to be completely changed because it launched on March the 1st when pretty much, a little later than that, but yeah, a global pandemic hit, and we realised we had to completely pivot and do everything virtually. But it actually worked to our benefit, and each mentee, we had 12 mentees, was given 2 mentors at Livewire, and they basically were either that shoulder to cry on, enabling them to improve their skills, but also the other way around, taken from them. It's like, what do you think we can do better? What do you feel isn't reaching you from a mainstream media perspective, or specifically in social and digital where we specialise in? So it was very much a two-way street, and in the first year, 4 of the 12 cohort are now full-time staff. The second year, we've got 3, and now it's Two Circles. It's called Diversity in Sports, and we've got a cohort of 30, and we've got 2 of them here today. So we're really, really proud to see everything developing, but no, it doesn't stop here. And I think the other really important thing is that as part of Two Circles, the whole company's engaged in this. It's not just let Pranav deal with this. Everyone is invested in it, and they realise, and again, it comes back to that that direct-to-consumer piece that we kind of specialise in, but those direct relationships with fans, and how do we nurture that, and then how do we benefit everyone to be as inclusive as possible in sport.
And not to get too personal, but how easy a conversation was that to have, obviously, when that first idea was suggested, and right, you know, our workforce is not diverse enough, we're not doing enough, this is what I'm suggesting. How easy was it to get that whole company buy-in and then to get it rolled out, and obviously now you are reaping the benefits?
It wasn't difficult at all, because we kind of realised that as you grow, especially within the startup, it's like, right, let's just get this thing up and running, and then when you're hiring, it's like, right, let's just find competent people. But what we realised, most of the competent people came from a specific background. And it was at the point where we were like, hang on a minute, this isn't right. And that was, I felt responsible for that, or partly responsible. So I was like, okay, what can I do to be part of that solution? So myself and Jason, who's head of marketing here, and we came up with the program, and we didn't really know what we were doing, if we're perfectly honest. And obviously Drew and BComs and Leon, and all the amazing work that they had done had really inspired us. But the biggest, I would say the biggest influence on us has been Channel 4. We've been working with them since London 2012, and their commitment they made back in 2010 to basically select 6 disabled presenters and basically put them through training to put them in front of the cameras at London 2012, to advance that to the point where in Beijing, 100% of the presenting talent were from disabled backgrounds. And we've also been part of the Channel 4's Paris trainee scheme, which is to get more disabled talent behind the camera and working in production companies. So that was the kind of the blueprint to help us find what we think we could contribute. So a lot of it is down to the amazing people that we work with.
Hayley, I think you can perhaps offer an impartial view on this, that you're a consultant, so you were approached by a number of organisations, and I suppose the scale is very different of well-established broadcasters and maybe startups and stuff like that. Do you empathise with the challenge of, say, hallmark, long-standing broadcasters of effectively trying to flip themselves, as opposed, I'm not trying to say for Pranav it was easy, but in being birthed in a digital age, and you know, the more accessible we are in terms of the more aware we are of these issues, compared to long-standing, you know, sports powerhouses, I guess.
Yeah, because I think there's like ED&I work, and there's also like culture change that needs to happen, and sometimes there's like definitely overlap between them, but often actually when you're trying to do things really differently and your culture is like rejecting that is a whole other beast that you need to battle with. But this is where I think leadership is really, really important. And actually there's a couple of examples that we've heard already where we need to, I mean, one of the things that, I'm not going to be cynical in this panel because we're about the positives, but one of the things that I notice a lot in these kind of spaces is, we need to get like diverse people in, and then all our problems are going to go because they're going to set up these committees, they're going to have all these ideas that are going to change us. My approach is very much, yes, we need that, we need the representation, but I feel like it kind of gives the people who are currently leading an opportunity to say, it's not my job, I'm going to wait for someone else to come in and change it. So actually, I think setting the tone at the top, the culture, being receptive to change, is something that most leadership teams can navigate. But I think the mentality is we need to wait for someone else to come in and be on our board or be on our senior leadership team, and they're going to help us. Like, no, like it's not enough. Like, you could be like a cis-het white man from a middle-class background who can get this stuff and lead it. Like, that's what I want people to do. Yes, we want the representation, but I think regardless of your size, leaders need to play a role. And that's why I think some of the examples we've heard on the panel, like that sort of reciprocal two-way mentoring, like even what you mentioned, Pranav, like, yes, mentor people, but actually receive learning from them as well, and realise that you might be a bit out of touch. There might be things that you can learn and implement. But also upskilling yourself to know that there are, you know, companies out there, they're not many, who are doing a good job, who do have strong leadership, who are overseeing these massive changes. So actually, what can I learn from outside of the sector? Who do I network with? Who's in my community that I can reach out to say, I've seen you've done this, you know, how can I do that? And I kind of urge like leadership to take that responsibility, because it is uncomfortable if you haven't got that lived experience, but it's not impossible.
Drew, the difficult question, so apologies. But what should leadership look like in terms of, say for example, this was our board here. If this was what do you think in order to truly get this, to move it forward, to make long-term change? What are the key characteristics of a leadership group that you feel?
I think this would be quite a good leadership group, I think, in terms of our lived experience and skill set. But I don't know if you'd see many leadership teams like this in reality. But I think people have to be open to change. I think they have to be open to be uncomfortable. I think that part of the reason why this has been a cyclical debate that's gone on for my 20-plus year career, and I know before me, is to get change, you have to be willing to be uncomfortable, right? And if you're in your space and everything's kind of nice, and your team around you is kind of nice, and they get on with you, and everyone's kind of saying everything's great, then some people are quite happy with that. If you then want to disturb that equilibrium, and then you want people to say, actually, this is kind of shit. This needs to change. Sorry, this needs to change. This needs to be improved.
That's right.
But also, you need people to say this is kind of shit.
Yeah, real talk.
Actually, like that.
Real talk. Yeah.
Right. So you do need people who are going to talk honestly and openly and challenge you. And so you need to be willing to take that. You need to be willing to be made to feel uncomfortable. You need to be willing to say, what we've been doing for the past 5 years hasn't worked. Incrementally increasing our diversity by 0.1% every year isn't enough. And you need to be willing to be uncomfortable. And I think that that's a key thing. And I think often change comes from an individual who is willing to say, we've been doing this and it's not good enough. And that means, if you get there and you really believe in it, in those positions, you have to make the most of that to kind of drive institutional change from the top down. I think expecting it to come from the bottom up, it kind of needs to meet in the middle, but it's quite difficult. I think, a lot of the schemes that we see around diversity, and obviously, at BComs we do a masterclass scheme, which has been fantastic for young people, bringing young people into the industry that haven't had the opportunity. But I think on that sense, it's not a favour. I think actually on the other side, I think it's the opposite. I think that young, diverse kind of people that come through a masterclass scheme like we run, are actually helping big organisations like this more than the opposite way. Because without fresh ideas, without fresh talent, without, like what you were talking about, Pranav, in terms of that social media eye, speaking to different kind of communities like them, a change demographic of this nation, which people aren't really alive to, particularly older people, without that skill set in your organisation, you're going to fade away into obscurity. You're just going to be doing the same stuff you were doing 10, 20, 30 years ago. So actually, as I say, it's we, on the masterclass, we're kind of helping these organisations to change. But I also think there needs to be something from the top as well. I think that we need to be bringing in and targeting more talented people, probably from outside of the sports media, maybe even from outside of the media in general, and saying, is there a talented person of colour? Is there a talented person from an LGBT background? Is there a talented person with disability that might be working in finance or might be working in law? Can we bring them in at a senior level to help drive that change, to help challenge the current leadership team that exists? I think people need to be a bit more innovative with their thinking and with their kind of hiring practices, particularly at that senior and middle level.
Jon, I think culture is definitely something that's come out on the opening panel in this, because I think you can maybe argue it's superficial to get the schemes out to say, right, we want you tick our box, come in. But then when you get in the workforce, if that's, again, not embodied throughout the practice of that organisation, you're then having retention issues as well. So again, let's try a bit more as regards to what positive things do you know that's out there as regards to, obviously, your specialism is LGBT. What good practices are out there for anyone who's looking to improve their EDI as regards to that particular area?
Yeah, I think it's about, I think network groups are really important. I mean, there's something that I'm really passionate about. I mean, I was part of one at Sky that was beyond just sports, but enabled me to make connections with people from across the business who were LGBT and allies. And I learned so much from that I wanted to take those learnings into kind of a cross-industry group, which is what I created. Because finding out and speaking to my peers in the industry, a lot of them worked for companies that didn't have that. So they were looking to make connections beyond just their own office space. And that's something that we've really fostered. I think there's a great sense of community, and we're seeing it more and more outside of sports media, but just in wider sport, the proliferation of network groups and the way that people kind of empower each other to kind of be more authentic when they're LGBT. I think it's something that's really powerful. Just on that point about bringing people in, I know it's something the Athletic has been focusing on recently, about having different talent days for people from different marginalised groups, and it's quite interesting actually to see the reactions on social media when, you know, a big media company like the Athletic asks people to say, you know, if you happen to be from one of these underrepresented groups, we're doing a talent day for you, here's the info. To see the kind of comments from people that feel excluded somehow from that, it just kind of makes the point for you in a way. It kind of shows that this kind of approach, and it's one of many approaches, as Hayley was saying, there's not just one way to do this kind of thing, but it's basically about opening doors, you know, creating pathways for people so that they can access those potential careers that they might not have considered before. I think that's really, really promising. We're doing, you know, that whole thing about culture. We're doing a survey at the moment. I'd really encourage people to check it out. It's on the hashtag DWord4 and sports media diversity, and we're trying to ask people from across the industry like what their experiences are like with regards to LGBT inclusion. So you don't have to be LGBT to take the survey. And actually, it's really interesting. We did this similarly 4 years ago when the last DWord conference happened, asking people, for example, have they witnessed any incidents of homophobic behaviour or language in the workplace in the previous 2 years. And although the numbers have fallen from 4 years ago when about 45% of people said that they had, the numbers are still around the 30% level, so that's 3 in 10 people. And of course, when you look at the LGBT part of that group as well, so, you know, if you're LGBT, have you witnessed this, then the numbers are a bit higher because, you know, as people, we're more attuned to this kind of behaviour, I would say. It could often be microaggressions, but other ways in which we're made to feel uncomfortable, you know, when assumptions are made about who we are, and so on and so forth. And actually, it was a really interesting statistic that came out this morning as a part of a YouGov survey, just asking about, you know, feeling included in the workplace in general, not just in sports media, but in all workplaces. And it was still like 64% of people felt excluded or discriminated against on the basis of sexuality, and about 70% on the basis of gender identity if they're trans or non-binary. So I think we can extrapolate that into sports media, and we're seeing with the responses that are coming back on the survey as well that there is absolutely work to do in this industry. It's not as welcoming as we might think, but of course people's experiences vary significantly depending on who they work for and the kind of career paths that they've taken.
And obviously invaluable research that you guys are doing. So yeah, please do check that survey out. Reminder, if anyone does want to ask any questions, I'm going to ask Pranav one more, then I will go. But don't worry, I'm sure we can talk about this for the remainder of the time if people don't have anything. But Pranav, as someone who regularly commissions content, what's the beauty of getting authenticity? So, you know, when you know that you look at a piece of work and you say, I know, it's not all necessarily just who's voiced it, who was the person on screen, but you know that EDI has been at the heart of ensuring that content is as best as it could be.
It's such a good question. And again, it comes back to the platforms that it goes out on. Who are we creating it for? What are we trying to do? What's the purpose of this piece of content? And specifically at the cutting edge of social platforms is the type of content that really cuts through. And you really notice that it's the stuff where people have put the time and effort into understanding the audiences it's trying to reach, and specifically the influences around it to then try and push that innovation. So when it comes to, again, I use it all the time, but the democratization of sport and media, but TikTok, for example, just flicking through TikTok and seeing so many talented people and thinking, how can these people take the message or take the business objectives of our clients to new audiences, but do it in a way that really resonates with them. I'm just trying to think of a good example, and one of my big clients is World Rugby. Rugby is one of my big passions when I was growing up. I don't watch it as much as I used to, but as a sport, you look at I think in 2019, the England team, I think 33% of that team came from BAME backgrounds, and a significant number of the media weren't part of that. But there's a brilliant underbelly of creators who don't come from that traditional background. And for us, it's finding those people and then taking that and giving them the platform to then be able to reach those new people. So yeah, we just constantly try and find people that just do really cool stuff and use them to work on behalf of our clients. And then also, if that stuff works really well, seeing how we can then adapt that to work with other people. But yeah, I mean, understanding your audience is, for me, the core piece. And specifically, when it comes to influences, so music, culture, entertainment, all of that stuff. I mean, I'm a man in my 40s. I'm not going to get that if we're talking about 16 to 24-year-olds. But I know a network of people that can do that, and they, most of them don't look like me, but they completely understand what the businesses that we're working with are trying to do.
And I guess from what you pointed out, from the top down, you can't do it, but you get how to get the people who can do it. I guess that's the sort of thinking,
absolutely.
the mindset.
It's exactly that. Because I mean, if we do it in the way that we think we should do it, it's not going to work, and no one wins then. Because ultimately, we do something that isn't particularly good. Our clients aren't happy. And the audiences are like, this doesn't really do anything for me. And again, you know, within 2 or 3 seconds, if it doesn't engage, you've lost that opportunity. So, you know, short attention spans, but thinking about how the mechanism of being able to reach your target audience, I think is so important.
Has anybody got any pressing questions for the panel? Like I say, no pressure. Yeah, gentleman just there, please. I think you're on someone. Yeah, we go. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sam from the Peach Mill. I've got lots of dying questions, and the panel's been fantastic. When we look at diversity and all the benefits that it brings, and we look at the statistics earlier on that Leon showed, why is it so difficult? Why is everyone talking about it? It's so long, it's so hard. It's been going on for a long time, and that senior leaders know that the more diverse an organisation is, it brings all these great other elements like effectiveness, dynamism, efficiency. What is the challenge? We talk about progress. We've had some progress, but nowhere near enough. We've got a long way to go, and I don't want to be cynical and say we haven't made any good progress and we should be still going. But my worry and the danger is that we lose that momentum. How many more people needs to go, like George Floyd, for example, for that shift in society and that culture to say it's really important? When actually we all know that's really important. Lots of different ingredients bake a good cake. Lots of different organisations. Can we explain the why, what success looks like? And I think by doing that, we can explain to organisations, these are the benefits, rather than, oh, we just need one from this group, one from that group. Because we're asking the person with power and influence to change the system within the organisation that they're benefiting from. So I know it's quite a long-winded information, but
Hayley,
I think it's about having that open honesty.
Yeah,
isn't it?
as people who've regularly sat in front of power makers, key stakeholders, what do you think, what are they not getting as regards to why it's taking, why some find it so difficult, I guess?
Okay. If I speak with my individual hat on rather than maybe Ecom's hat on, so this is Drew Christie speaking here. I think that the turkeys don't vote for Christmas, right? So a bit like what I spoke before, if you want to change an organisation, that makes the space less comfortable for the people already in it. That changes the culture. That means that maybe they or their friends, or maybe more importantly, their children, might not get a job in that organisation. That is part of the issue. It's part of saying, you know what, do we want a real meritocracy in this industry? This is wider than this industry. This is a nationwide question. Do we want meritocracy? Do we want equity? Do we want people to be able to reach the heights that they can? Or do we want an element of an unfair system, people getting head starts? Now, if you benefit from a head start, why would you give that up? That's a genuine question, because nobody would. You know, this is me speaking personally, probably off the record, but on the record. Off the record? No, but No, but for real, that's what I genuinely believe. People will not give up an advantage.
It's about
And anyone who
power.
has an advantage or has ever experienced advantage, I'm a man, I have an advantage in society. Would I give it up? I probably should, for fairness, but I also know that it gives me certain benefits. And that's the reality we're dealing with.
Hayley, you were agreeing there, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's all about power, isn't it? And the reality is, like, organisations know they can make more money, but they can still do how they want to do things and not make, more money because they're making enough. So there's that. And I think I know it's going a little bit more negative, but I'm here for that. I think the reality is a lot of the sort of rhetoric around ED&I does sort of even reinforce this, because a lot of the time it is exploitation. So it's even like this argument, we want to bring diversity in so we can make more money. I don't really buy that. That's not why I do what I do. Obviously, we know it's a fact, but I don't think we should bring people in at entry level to make content for us. Then it's exploitation if they're not getting the profit at the end of the day, when it's a shareholders meeting or whatever it might look like. So I think it is about power. I think it is about sort of like old boys club mentality as well. Because I have seen in organisations which you've got one amazing CEO or two amazing people on a leadership team, and they do actually get rid of those people who don't want this. And they're quite happy because they're actually at the top. We can change things because I've made it now, I've done what I want to do, so actually I'm just going to rip everything apart. And sorry for the people who are in middle management who wanted to get up to that level, maybe this isn't for you. So I do think, to bring it back around to the positives, the people at the top, they kind of don't have as much of a vested interest in it now because they are there. The issue tends to be the people just below them. They don't want things to change because actually they're the people who are more in control and have power over what happens on the ground, and they're still trying to get that top spot. So this is why it's them we sort of need to target, and probably we need to remove some of the people from that don't get it. And it goes back to the culture point. There's no point in talking about inclusive cultures if you haven't got a zero tolerance to discrimination, and if people are not committed to the values that the organisation says they uphold. The biggest challenge I have in organisations is, okay, we're going to do this work. We've heard people's experiences. If people don't sign up to this, if they don't fulfil their promises, you have to get rid of them. Are you going to do that? And often people do say no. And that's where we need to judge how invested people actually are. And it's only a small thing. It doesn't cost money to say, we actually need everyone to sign up for this. Yeah. But people are unwilling to do it because it seems maybe I'm radical, too radical.
I think,
Yeah, sure.
add one thing, which I think is not to be negative, and I think to take it back to a positive place, is we have seen changes within sports media. I've seen it within my time, and that's particularly around the issue of female representation, particularly in kind of middle and senior management. That's really improved in sports media over the past 10, 20 years. And when I say female, I mean white women. That's really improved. But sport in particular is a very male-dominated industry. So the fact that we've seen those real strides in female representation is a good thing. But I think it's simple to just take those lessons and put them into other areas of diversity. So actually, if you really want a female leader, you'll go and find one. You'll see someone in your organisation, you'll develop them and train them. And I think you can do that around whether it's a black or a brown person, whether it's somebody from an LGBT background, whether it's somebody with a disability. You can actually train and develop staff that you already have to be in the position where they can be leaders in the future. And I think that's an important thing for organisations to do.
Sam, thanks very much for your question. I know we did start a little bit late, so I'll wait till people start moving behind us, but I think we've probably got maybe 5 to 10 minutes left, so I'm keen to hear from other people. Just lady at the front here, please.
Thank you. So with all that's been said so far, I'm just interested in, I think with diversity, equity, and inclusion at the moment, a lot of people have this assumption that it's a zero-sum game, and what I mean by that is that that a loss for one group, a gain for one group is a loss for another, and I personally don't think that. So I'd just love to hear your opinion on kind of how we can kind of encourage just people in general, in the industry, in the different organisations, that it's not a zero-sum game. It's a benefit for everybody. So just interested in hearing your thoughts.
Jon, Pranav, do you want to have a stab at that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we've often spoken about as well. It's not pie, for example. It's not one diversity group or one underrepresented group is taking this slice of the pie away from someone else. It's like those comments that I mentioned about, under the athletics post that has mentioning talent days for an underrepresented group. You know, it's about, I mean, certainly from my perspective, it's about, you know, just trying to sort of shift people's thinking on workplace culture and ensuring that, you know, if people are LGBT in a particular workplace, then they feel empowered to bring their authentic selves, you know, their whole selves to their job. And you know, this point about, oh, we need to pick one from each marginalised group so we've got representation in all these areas, that doesn't work. Certainly doesn't work for LGBT people, because the majority of them, I would say in general, are probably not out at work, so you wouldn't even have that visible representation anyway. You know, what we want to be doing is creating, obviously, inclusive cultures and workplaces so that everybody feels able, you know, to be more than just a statistic.
Yeah, it's not specifically about the workforce, but we did we held a conference a couple of weeks back where 200 of Two Circles clients came, and we talked about various different things, and one of those was diversifying your tribe. Effectively, how can you get more people at your events? And we ran a really interesting survey that for hospitality, only 28% of the clients there offered kosher and halal food as part of that. You know, and it's such a simple fix, and it's not that difficult to do, but you know, it was such a low number. And the other one was replica kits. 83% of the organisations that were there offered replica kits female, but that was so 4 out of 5, but there was still that one that wasn't. And it's just those little things that can make such a big difference. And we talk about incremental gains. I think it's little things like that, or huge things like that can make a real impact. And you know, the more people that are going through gates, enjoying sport, getting into sport, moving into the media, moving into the marketing side, which is where I work, and all the other incredible careers that sport opens. I think that's where we benefit as a whole. But I think a lot of that has to come back to someone who says, well, hang on a minute, have we thought about this? And that's what we're trying to do. And again, not saying that we're doing it right, but we're just trying to open eyes a little bit wider.
Thank you. Is there any more questions from the floor? Yes, sorry, just gentleman at the back there with his hand raised.
Hi there. I just wondered what your view on quotas and targets are, and whether there is some benefit in targets, even if they're soft targets rather than hard targets. And if you do agree with them, what sort of form they should take.
So, for example, I know when you're perhaps asking what form, it's where they say we should commission so much content from a certain... Yeah. Anyone want to have a... So
I can bring up a recent experience on that. So again, working with Channel 4 as part of the Tokyo 2020 Games, the Paralympic Games, Channel 4 had asked us that 19% of our workforce, as part of Live Wire Sport, were from a disabled background. And we were really pleased that we hit that. And that was not only people that were working within the company, but also our diversity and digital cohort and other freelancers that were also part of that as well. So again, it shouldn't be something that we crow about, but for us it was a big deal because it was something that we wanted to do and we managed to do, and it was everyone wins. And I think, you know, it's having that quota on our back forced us to look harder, and it was well worth it. But then on the flip side, I have seen it where it hasn't worked out so well as well. So, you know, it is a double-edged sword. And I think a lot of it has to do with the mentality of the organisation that is implementing it and how it sees that, whether it sees it as a burden or whether it actually sees it as an opportunity. And I will always be on the opportunity side. But yeah, it does need careful consideration.
Because Hayley, I guess perhaps just in terms of the whole organisation buy-in, isn't it? In terms of, I'm sure we perhaps all work for organisations where people have approached me and said, "You're doing this scheme, why?" You know, and I probably don't know anything about it, and maybe their gripe is due. And I guess again, it boils down to everyone being involved within the organisation to say, "Look, this is something we're buying into. This is the target. Yes, Drew's pointed out it's uncomfortable, but everyone needs to be involved in the organisation."
Yeah, I think the things that have been proven to work are having like objectives. So leadership, especially like CEO, having an objective that they have to it could be implementing their strategy, it could be like qualitative kind of targets, or it could be around headcount or something else. And that is when it's like linked to their pay, we do see organisations massively progress. So I think it's that accountability point. And I think the difficulty is in the UK that targets are not super easy to be able to implement, but people do it. And just from outside of sport, one of the clients that I've worked with who does really, really well on this, they literally have meetings every 2 months. All of their area managers are in the room, and they've got data which says like, this is what your like diversity looks like in your area. If you've not hit that, you have to explain why. And they might not get sacked after that meeting, but that everyone's come to that meeting making sure they've done it, because it's awkward to go around the table and you're the only one that's not been able to do that. So it doesn't always have to be, really strict targets, but I personally feel like we need to get to that point, because actually we need to create equity and justice, but actually just having that accountability and asking people why you've not done it, it obviously makes a big difference.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? I think I've just got time for... No, sorry, apologies, I'm getting the signals. I tried for you, but I think just finish things off. Round of applause for our panel, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.